Thank you for joining Pioneer. I'm Chris with Norman Public Library Central, and this is the next lesson in our series on the Swift computer programming language. In our last lesson, we covered functions. We first created a function called printHello that didn't take any information from the outside and didn't return any information to the rest of our program. We then wrote a function called CoinToss that still didn't take any information from outside, but did return a piece of information, in this case a string, to the rest of our program. And finally, we created a function called DoSomeTosses that did take a single piece of information from the outside, a number of times to toss our coin. Inside DoSomeTosses, we saw a new sort of for loop, or really an old sort of for loop used in a new way. In today's lesson, I'd like to focus on the contents of that for loop, and in particular, this item right here, 0 ... less than number to do, which is called a half-open range, or to Swift, just a range. Let's get started. Last lesson's challenge was to make the computer choose lunch for you for the week. Here's my solution to that challenge. I began by writing a function called getLunch. GetLunch didn't take any parameters and returns a string. Inside getLunch, we have our array of lunch options, and then we choose a random element from that array and we return it to the calling code. I then wrote another function called lunchthisweek that doesn't take any parameters and doesn't return anything. It's a completely self-contained function. And it says for_in 0 ... less than 7, and then in curly braces it prints lunch will be, and then whatever lunch it chooses using the getLunch function. I then call lunchthisweek one time, and when I run this code, it prints out lunch will be pizza. And pizza, and pizza, and pizza, and pizza, and then one time I get deep fried Snickers and one time I get pasta. So again, the computer has very good taste in lunch. In today's lesson, I'd like to focus on this for loop, and in particular, the 0 ... less than 7 construct, called a range, or a half-open range if you're a mathematician. Let's take a look at how Swift deals with ranges of numbers. I can begin by creating a new variable, and I'll call it SumInts. And my SumInts is going to be equal to the range from 0 up to, but not including, the number 10. That's what the ... less than means. This will be all the numbers from 0 to 10, but not including the 10. If I made a closed range, ... then it would include the 10, and in fact there would be 11 numbers in that range. Well, I'd really only like the numbers 0 through 9 in this case, so I will say 0 ... less than 10. Again, that's called a half-open range. I don't have to just use integers, however. I could make some doubles. And I can make that equal to 0.0 through 10.0. There is one very significant difference between these two ranges, and that is that SumInts has a fixed number of numbers in it. It has 10 numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. But SumDoubles actually has an infinite number of numbers in it. All of the possible numbers between 0.0 and 10.0, but of course not including 10.0, but including 9.9, and 9.99, and 9.999999999. So, technically, an infinite number of numbers. That means that in some cases we have to use these things differently. I can check to see whether a number is in one of these ranges, like this. I could say, if SumInts dot contains, and I'll check to see whether it contains a 5. And if it contains 5, I'll print 5 is in the range. And of course, that should print out. Let's give it a try. And sure enough, 5 is in the range of our integers. Now let's see if 5 is in the range of our doubles. And sure enough, 5 is also in the range of doubles. But If I try to say if sum ints dot contains, and I want to check to see whether 3.14159 is in my integers, the Swift compiler is going to tell me I've made a mistake. It can't convert a value of type double to the expected argument of type int. It's literally impossible to ask a range of integers whether it contains a double. However, if I check if sum doubles contains 3.14159, yay, pi. And I can print that out. I can also loop over ranges as long as those ranges have a fixed number of numbers in them. We've already seen this for number in some ints, and I can print out the number. And if I run this code, sure enough, it will print out 0 through 9. But if I try to say for number in some doubles, I'll actually crash Apple's compiler. It says an internal error occurred. Source editor functionality is limited. Attempting to restore. This is such a catastrophic error, the compiler doesn't even know what to do with it. I have asked it to print out an infinite number of numbers, and it absolutely cannot do that. So we should probably delete that line of code. Today's challenge is a little more challenging. I'd like you to create a range that contains all of the years that you have been alive so far. So begin with the year you were born, all the way up through whatever year it is right now, 2020 as I record this lecture. Then I'd like you to create another array that contains a list of adjectives, that is, descriptive words like good or bad or lugubrious. Then I would like you to loop through your range of years and print out that each one of those years was some random choice from that list of adjectives. So, 1980 was a good year. 1973 was a very terrible year, etc. So, your challenge is to combine a lot of the information that you have learned so far into a single program that prints out information that you've made up about each one of those years. Good luck, and I'll see you next time.